Melty and crisp cheese loaded with carne asada, all added to a fresh flour tortilla, slathered with a chipotle and cilantro chimichurri. Add some pickled onions, and this is it, Chief.
So we're setting the bar a lot higher than your typical steak quesadilla. The only thing I'm missing right now is some fresh Oaxaca cheese. Mozzarella works okay as a substitute, but it's just not the same. Anyway, the recipe is going to start right here. However, I would suggest you stay around for the inspiration for this dish and also some cool cooking knowledge. Let's get into this thing.
The spirit of my recipe today is pairing carne asada with one of my favorite quesadilla vendors while I was in Mexico City. This quesadilla spot had a hot comal with different choices of meats, which were then mixed with Oaxaca cheese right on the hot griddle. The flour tortillas are made into an oval and cooked made to order and served up with a variety of fresh toppings. Now, carne asada at its most basic is a marinated steak cooked over on a dry heat that could be wood fire or a griddle. As Rick Bayless points out in Mexico One Plate at a Time, the most famous carne asada a la tempequeña is a thin-cut beef tenderloin that is lightly marinated, then seared on the grill and served with various accoutrements. So I wanted to combine those two pieces of inspiration with some slight changes to suit my tastes and cooking style. Number one, I'm going to be slicing the steak before marinating because I want to create maximum surface area for the flavors of the marinade to stick on, so then we don't need an hour or two for the steak to marinate. Also, for the base marinade, all you really need is salt, oil, and acidity, but I'm adding a couple extra spices into the mix. Number two, I'm using a shot of mezcal or tequila on the steak right before grilling. The mezcal has flavor in and of itself, but additionally, the alcohol helps bind fat and water molecules that are going to carry additional flavor compounds and aromas to our mouth and nose. Lastly, I'm taking a page from the Uruguayan and Argentinian cuisine with an uncooked chimichurri, except Mexican-inspired, where I'll be substituting cilantro for parsley and introducing a rehydrated chipotle meco for smoky flavor. Also, I'm adding some lime zest for sour and bitter notes.
So other than that, we're throwing everything into a fresh homemade tortilla with cheese, and I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. Let's make the damn thing.
Let's start with the steak. Using a sharp knife, begin slicing across the grain of the steak into very thin slices. Now, I'm using a flat iron, which is a cut from the chuck or shoulder of the cow, but other great choices for this would be skirt steak, flank steak, or hanger steak. You're going to add the steak to a large bowl, and now we'll prepare the marinade. In a separate bowl, add 30 milliliters of olive oil, the juice of 1 lime or another acidic liquid like vinegar. Then add in 6 grams of salt, 2 grams of cumin, 2 grams of smoked paprika, and 2 grams of ancho chili powder. Now you're just going to whisk this mixture until it becomes a slight emulsion. Pour the marinade over the steak and just mix it until it's well combined and covers all the surface area. Now I'm going to leave this in the fridge while we prepare our tortillas, but you could absolutely grill this up right away and it will be delicious. Okay, tortillas. For the tortillas, add 6 grams of salt to 250 milliliters of warm water, and you're going to gently mix that until it starts to dissolve. Now in a separate bowl, add 450 grams of flour, and I'm also going to add 80 grams of pork lard. Now you can absolutely substitute butter in this case, and I showcase that in my in-depth video on these same flour tortillas. Using your fingers, work the pork lard into the flour until it is nice and crumbly. Once the flour is nice and crumbly and the pork lard has started to be incorporated, we're going to pour in our salt water and begin mixing this with our hands until a sticky and shaggy dough forms. You're going to turn the dough out onto the counter and just begin kneading it for about 6 minutes until the dough is fairly smooth and it is no longer sticking. Now we're going to cover the bowl and we're going to let this rest in the fridge for at least 20 minutes. And while that's resting, I'm going to make a really tasty chipotle cilantro chimichurri. Now, traditionally, chimichurri is an uncooked herb sauce that is used to spread on a variety of grilled meats. We're just making ours a little bit more Mexican-inspired. To start, remove the stem and seed from a dried chipotle. Now, this is a dried chipotle meco I brought back from Mexico City, but you could easily just substitute a canned chipotle in adobo for this as well. You're gonna place that chipotle in a bowl and pour some hot water over it, then set this aside and let it rehydrate for about 5 minutes. Now in a food processor, add in a large handful of cilantro, 2 garlic cloves, the zest from half a lime, and the juice from that same lime. Add in 30 milliliters of olive oil and toss in our hydrated chipotle. Lastly, add a pinch of salt and a few cranks of fresh ground pepper. You're going to pulse this mixture until it is a well-combined herb sauce. As always, taste it and adjust salt as you see fit. Now, if you want this a little thicker, you can add some more cilantro, or if you wanted it thinner, you can add some water. But let's get back to our tortillas. See how the dough has relaxed and it is much more pliable? That is the benefit of letting it rest for those 20 minutes or up to 2 hours. Now what we're going to do is cut the dough into 9 even-sized balls about 80 grams each. Now this is going to give us a fairly large burrito-sized tortilla, but feel free to make these any size that you want. Once portioned, just roll all the pieces into a taut little dough ball. And also another really cool thing about these is that you can make them into the balls ahead of time and then just store them in your fridge for up to 3 to 4 days. Then just roll them out and you literally have on-demand fresh tortillas in your fridge. It's pretty sweet. For example, I didn't cook all 9, I threw 6 in a container that I can have throughout the week. Now we can start rolling out the tortillas. First, press the ball with your hands into a circular disc, and now we're going to take a rolling pin and just roll them out. What I like to do is move in one direction and then rotate the tortilla and repeat that process until I get them very thin. Now I like them super thin, but I'll let you be the master of your tortilla thickness. And also don't worry about getting them perfectly circular. I kind of like the character of the slightly misshapen ones. With all the tortillas rolled out, place a damp paper towel over top so they don't dry out while we head to the stove and cook our steak and things. You're going to set a cast iron over medium-high heat, and while that's coming to temp, add a shot of mezcal to the steak and mix that in. Remember, this is going to give smoky flavor from the mezcal itself, but it's also going to help with the flavor aromas when it evaporates when cooked. Now add the steak to the cast iron, letting the excess marinade drip off, and you're just going to cook this until it is nice and cooked through. It won't take more than a few minutes. And since we do have that liquid on the outside, it's not going to get super nice and browny, but it is going to have a nice flavor. Plus, it's in a quesadilla, so you're not going to really notice the browning anyway. And since we aren't worried about cooking it to medium rare, it's going to have a little bit of chew, but that's kind of what we're looking for with this steak quesadilla. Once the steak is done, you're going to slide that off into a separate bowl and just clean the griddle for our tortillas. So set up your workstation with the fresh tortillas, the steak, cheese, and chimichurri, or any other toppings you are using. For me, I also decided to add some pickled onions because I always do. And again, I'm going to mimic the style of the quesadilla that I saw made in Mexico. At the top of the griddle, add a handful of cheese and a bunch of the carne asada so it starts melting together. And we do this because the fresh tortilla is going to cook so fast. Lay one of your fresh tortillas on the hot griddle and let it cook for just 15 to 20 seconds until it starts to puff up and bubble. Once it's there, flip the tortilla over and let it cook for another 10 to 15 seconds. Now I'm going to bring down that melty, crispy cheese and steak and then layer it on with chimichurri and pickled onions or anything else you are using. Once you have all your toppings added, fold the tortilla over and just press down on that for 10 seconds to help get some nice crispy edges on the bottom of the tortilla. Then flip it and press down again for another 10 seconds. And you can see we get these nice crispy edges from that homemade flour tortilla where the bubbles are. Now we can transfer that to a cutting board, slice it, and enjoy. And this is a thick and juicy steak quesadilla.
Alright everyone, so full recipe will be up on my website, which as always is linked below for the step-by-step process. And actually the first one I made of these, I completely forgot to throw on my pickled onions because I was just too excited to eat this. Also gonna hit it with a little bit of extra hot sauce for some bite, some spiciness. Ooh, That's a good bite. That steak's juicy, tangy. I mean, with the homemade tortilla, you really cannot go wrong. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, drop me a like and subscribe, and definitely make this one. I mean, even if you don't make the flour tortillas, like this could come together in 10, 15 minutes. You don't even have to let that steak, you know, sit in the fridge or anything. You cook it right away if you want to, and it's gonna be absolutely delicious. But that's gonna wrap it up for me in this one. I'll catch you in the next one.